Your frontline workers are your first line of defense against costly food recalls and quality holds. When properly trained and fully engaged, they can prevent allergy defects, foodborne illnesses, and other food safety incidents that could wreak havoc on your brand and your profits. There are no gray areas in food safety. Minimize risk and strengthen your food safety culture with Alchemy.
Hello, everyone. Gosh, thanks for joining us on this great session. My name's Laura Dunn Nelson. I'm the Vice President of Food Safety and Global Alliances for Intertech Alchemy, and I am honored to be able to introduce this fantastic session entitled Quest for a Healthy Food Safety Culture, Part 2, Industry Expert Perspectives. And boy, do we have a treat with you with some fantastic speakers. Brian Perry, Senior Vice President of Food Safety and Quality at Treehouse Foods, Inc. Corey Chapman, Operations Improvement Manager, Ring Container Technologies. Welcome, Corey and Brian. And Polly Tartaria, Food Safety and Quality Program Manager, Killer Brownie. Hi, Polly. Thanks for being here. These industry experts are going to be representing companies of all sizes in the food sector categories, and they've successfully walked the walk for food safety culture that meets the SQF Edition 9 requirements. So they're going to share their best practices that you can apply in your own company. Food safety culture has certainly evolved over the last 10 years, moving from a buzzword to a defined and measurable operational state. Intertech Alchemy, we've partnered with industry on their food safety journey over the years and have seen firsthand how innovative training, including effective food safety training, consistent employee coaching, all about those behaviors, and directed leadership training can really drive compliant employee behaviors. And that's what we're after. We all know that employees that are following our food safety management programs translate to reduce food safety risk. And I'm excited to learn more about the food safety culture these innovative companies have taken to improve their food safety performance. Just a little point here. If you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the comments section and use the question mark icon. And be sure to stick around for the post-session chat, where you'll be able to get into small groups so you can exchange ideas and share thoughts around this fabulous topic. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Brian, Corey, and Polly.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to SQF and Institute and FMI for asking us to come on and speak about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's this quest for the healthy food safety culture. And it is a continuing journey, and at Treehouse, we are by no means where we want to be, but we've made several strides, and we want to share a few of those things with you that maybe you can pick up and use in your day-to-day, and as you're going into plants and organizations, to be able to take a look at it and evaluate where those organizations are from a food safety culture. So next slide. So just a little bit about Treehouse. We are a very, very diverse portfolio of products. And as you can kind of see here with all of these different areas that we're all over the store. If you'll go to the next slide, you think about all of the complexity that comes in with the different types of products that we have. We have over 40 manufacturing locations. We're in all parts of the store as you think about that from Treehouse. Primarily a private brand manufacturer and helping to build our customers and brands for them to make sure that we have the privilege and responsibility of both protecting our customers' brands in the marketplace, as well as our own brand in the marketplace, as well as Treehouse. So that's very integral in who we are. We also have some great branded businesses as well that you may know in regional brands, but it's all about that trust and promise. And I'll talk a little bit about how food safety culture might help you to grow those brands. So next slide. So what do we define? What is food safety culture? And you think about it and how we define it at Treehouse. You see this word cloud here. I won't go through that, but it's really the values, the belief, the habits, the practices, the traditions that you pass on within an organization. And I like to say it's kind of the smell of the place. You just know it when you see it. There's the feel of that food safety culture as it goes through. So next slide. And why is it important? I love this Peter Drucker quote. It really looks at organizational culture, eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I like this little icon of Pac-Man. This probably dates me a little bit, but those values and those beliefs are really what drives those behaviors that Laura mentioned when no one is watching. Next slide. When you think about your food safety culture, ask yourself to ask these next questions. So if you'll bring up those questions, is it assumed? Are those things that we can just know are going to be there? Can you see it as well? Are you seeing those behaviors? So a great way to understand that, go in the restrooms, go in the locker rooms, go in the welfare areas. You'll see if there's a food safety culture. Is it shared and transferred as new people come into the organization? Do they feel that? And then you see the little jar there. Is it sustainable? Can it build upon itself as it goes forward? So next slide. One of the things that's important as you go on this journey of food safety and quality, building that culture of food safety, is to make sure that you don't do that in a silo. It has to be connected to your overall company's culture and what your values are. And if you think about one of the things that our new CEO came in a few years ago, Steve Oakland, one of the things pre-pandemic that we worked on was around our culture here at Treehouse. And that has really paid dividends as we've weathered the storm as that goes through there. And you can see right here, this is actually on our website. I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. It's publicly stated of our values and our vision and our mission. So tying your culture, your food safety culture, to your overall company culture is important. And you can see it right there in the Treehouse purpose, making high quality food and beverages affordable all. What a great way to kind of integrate food safety culture into who we are and who we want to be the undisputed solutions leader in custom brands. So next slide. And it's important to make sure that you build your food safety culture around your company's values and work with your company and your organization to help shape those values. And again, I mentioned these are on our website. You can go and read them on your own on Treehouse Foods. But these values around own it and committing to excellence and be agile and speak up and being better together, I think you can see how elements of our values are important in our culture of food safety. Being able to encourage all of our employees to speak up and stop the line when there's an issue. Committing to excellence. What a great way to kind of align with what food safety culture should be. And then being agile. Talk about that being a value and what this has meant over the last couple of years with the supply chain disruptions and elements that have come through the pandemic, and owning it and being able to be ingrained and engaged in the processes that you're a part of. All of that helps to build into our food safety culture. Next slide. So we did not just begin this as it became part of the codes. It's been a journey for us, and it continues to be a journey as we continue to mature as an organization. We began this really back in 2012, thinking about different stages of a culture of quality model, and we've kind of morphed that now into both food safety and quality, and we kind of combine the two. And as you think about when we were 12 years ago, what the measure of success was, it was not having recalls. And then you move to, okay, how do I address that? How do I look at near misses, or those things that we call quality incidents? And then working on preventive controls in the next stage of that. And I think we've all been on that journey as well with FSMA. And now we're looking at creative quality. How do we unlock to be having an error-proof food safety system and a predictive quality system? So next slide. And you really got to look and evaluate, how are you actually living it? How do you not just give it lip service? And that how do you get employees to live those core values and behaviors? And it's really looking around those things that you see around signals that you get the leadership and peer buy-in. Our best plants are the plants where each person looks out for one another for both a safety perspective and a food safety perspective. If you've got that, you've unlocked so much power in your organization. Making sure that you have a good framework that sets it up and that you have accountability and clear metrics and a vision and the tools to be able to do the job, and then connect it to what's in it for me. What is that motivation, and how do you build those incentives into that and make sure that, that personal risk reduction, that's a great way to sell this in the C-suite, because nobody looks good in orange, right? So we want to make sure that this is part of our living daily in food safety and quality. So next slide. So we put together a comprehensive plan that we've worked over the last few years, and this has been a real focus for us this year, and it's built around many different things. I won't read all of those areas here to you, but again, built on the foundation of our vision and mission. And then looking at people and making sure it's in their objectives. One of our leading indicators in this is how well do we deliver our training. So each quarter, we want to make sure that in our training curriculum that we use Alchemy for, that 90% or better of those have touched those individuals with that training. And then we've got a method of how effective those were to be able to measure that. So if they don't know what good looks like, how are you going to get good? And that communication and governance that goes with it. Consistency is important. Adaptability, wow, this really has come into play as you have all of the different elements of labor concerns, supply concerns, all of that's important. And then really knowing where the hazards are and how to do a risk assessment. Next slide. So it does need to be a top-down approach, and there has to be that leadership commitment. So here at Treehouse, we have an independent board of directors who are very engaged in food safety and quality. And one of the neat things that our founder and CEO did here at Treehouse was to set up a food safety and compliance steering committee. So once a month, we get an opportunity to present in front of all of our senior leaders in our C-suite, what our objectives are, how we're doing in those things along those lines, and driving that down across the organization. So next slide. So, and if you'll continue to build on this slide, you have to integrate this on the food safety quality system. So if you'll bring up the next piece there, Brett, we can pull that as a common thread all the way through those policies and procedures that go through how we design, product, buy, make, ship, and trade that. And finally, the feedback from the consumer that needs to be that food safety culture needs to be built into all those elements. Next slide. And then how do we measure success? A lot of what we look at is how do we measure our continuous improvement opportunities? We have a Treehouse management operating system that we have put in place that's very similar to some of the things that you've seen in Lean and TPM. We make sure that we integrate our food safety culture into those elements, making sure that we're keeping up with our training, looking at our metrics actually reflecting that culture being effective across the board. So next slide. And then you'll get these slides, and I apologize, we're going through them pretty quickly, but as you think about that, you're going to have areas where it doesn't hit. And you got to go through that root cause analysis and that cultural adoption challenges that come through there. And is the message not received, or is it not delivered well? And taking a look at those areas, if it's the environment, if it's the underestimation of risks, all of those things, as you think about that, address it like you would root cause in any other food safety or quality concern. Next slide. This is a continuing journey. It's making sure we weave it into our purpose, mission, and values, and our, as you can see through those, commitment to excellence and speaking up, making it part of our purpose, making it part of what our P's and Q's are: people, safety, quality, and service. We start every meeting with those things. And that really helps to set the tone for what our food safety culture is, and then aligning those metrics. Next slide. And if you'll build on this too, why does this matter? We could talk about all of these different stats around how foodborne illness impacts. But if you'll bring up the next picture of Beck, this young man was 10 months old. He lived in Seattle. and had a really negative impact from a foodborne illness, where he was eating a puff rice cereal, something that mothers love to give to their kids that are at that less than a year old. And he got very sick, went into the hospital, had diarrhea. Luckily, he didn't have any bad impacts over time. But as it turns out, he was one of 55 people who were impacted by an outbreak of seasoning blends that was sourced out of China. So making sure that food safety culture is not only in your organization, but in your vendors and partners and all along your supply chain, you can see where that really hits home with individuals. Next slide. The good news is Beck is recovered, and his family has done a really nice job working with STOP and others to help build a food safety culture across other organizations. So next slide. It really does build trust. You can help build your business through this. You can see consumer groups, food manufacturers all care about it. Next slide. And you can see from a customer perspective and consumer perspective, 49% of our store brand customers buy products from what they build trust. And food safety culture will help you build your trust with your customers. Next slide. And if you'll go ahead and build on this, Brad, we know what happens when you don't get there. And build one more time. It means a lot of economic impact. And there's over $7 billion that are caused by foodborne illness in the National Institutes of Health, and empty shelves when we don't get it right. So next slide. So I'm going to pause right here, and I'm going to turn it over to Corey, who's going to talk a little bit about his experience in food safety and quality culture.
And great job, Brian, and thank you. So I work for Ring Container Technologies. Next slide. And Ring manufactures plastic bottles primarily for the food industry, but we also service the pet care and chemical markets. It was founded in 1968. It's headquartered in Oakland, Tennessee. Assuming you guys don't know where that is, it's a suburb of Memphis. We have 19 sites, including 2 international. Most of you will probably be able to look in your pantry or your refrigerator and find a Ring logo on the bottom of one of the bottles in your house. Next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Management. I'm not from a food background. I'm not a scientist. I started with the company just as a management trainee. And the point isn't about me, but that anyone can champion and influence food safety. You just have to be passionate about your job and maybe, like me, like to eat food, preferably safe food. Next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story about Ring's journey in food safety, which began in the 90s. What you see on the left is what I would find during my internal audits in the early 2000s. Junk drawers, parts left out on equipment, material left out. You would find open grease cups, all sorts of things. What you see on the right is pretty typical of where Ring is today. Bright, clean, shiny, everything's in its place. Next slide. So, our journey really grew over the course of the next 10 or 15 years. We knew food safety was important. We knew it was something that customers that they needed, but they weren't really asking for it. We were doing it voluntarily. It was pretty fragmented. We didn't fully understand how it applied to packaging. Our maintenance techs and warehouse employees said, you know what, not my responsibility. Our staff was pretty limited. They were mechanically oriented. So they knew how to keep the machines running, but asking them to learn food safety was a pretty foreign concept to them. So like many of you, we selected a standard, we wrote policies, we trained on new practices, and we focused on the checklist. Next slide. So over the years, we got a lot better. We started to think more like the customer. We started to think like a consumer. We're able to tap into our data, trend, analyze. We're learning that, sharing best practices is really important. Let's pull more people into development. We started to scale back and streamline and really understand how it applied to our business. Next slide. Around 2007 to 2009, a lot of you may recall there were some really large peanut butter recalls. Some of our customers were checking on our plants to make sure that packaging wasn't going to cause a recall in their facilities. This made us realize that, food safety really is important to our customers. It wasn't just something that we thought was the right thing to do. By 2013, customers were starting to inquire about GFSI. Just a few years later, all of our major customers were asking us to do something different than the checklist, just like SQF. We were seeing a big shift in customer expectations, and they were diving deeper into our business and how we do things. We were starting to use social media more as well, so our name was more out in the public. Next slide. So that same year in 2016, a director of one of our major customers visited a couple of Ring sites. He shared his opinion. He said, "You know what? You guys have adopted the right standard with SQF. You have great documentation, but I'm not sure that you recognized your role in the food chain early on. Maybe you're not listening to people as well." He wanted to see us commit from the top down and lead by example. This was tough to take considering how long we've been focusing on food safety. Next slide. So this meant it was clear we had a program implemented, but when events occurred, we could find a physical control that failed. But the root cause was really below the surface. It was the culture. For example, if we had grease on a bottle, did we just repair the bearing? Did we dive into how it could have been detected? Was it an internal audit? Maybe a PM? Did we put a control in place to make sure the grease, if it did get on occur again, that it couldn't get on a bottle? Did we identify the process failure that caused the bearing to fail in the first place? Maybe someone saw it and just didn't report it. Next slide. So after that customer's feedback, we realized our mentality had to shift. Our CEO communicated the importance of food safety. We started talking about it in our executive meetings. We communicated changes and best practices more often to our plants. Employees were doing more swaps with customers so that we could understand their process, and likewise. We even went as far as coming up with a new title for our quality manager role and started hiring directly from the food industry. We expanded our observation card system to include food safety observations. We even have our food safety non-conforming and customer complaints. At that time, we started realizing, you know what? Corporate office needs to be notified immediately. They need to become involved. We started attending the SQF conferences and becoming involved in helping shape the code. Next slide. When SQF 9 came out, we knew culture was not a destination and it wasn't a checkbox. It definitely was not anything new, at least to us. Like many of you, we very quickly realized that we had a lot of culture drivers already in place: commitment, goals, observations, partnerships. SQF 9 was really just formalizing the path that we had already been working on for a very long time. Next slide. So our first step was to review the code, read the white papers, read articles, attend several webinars, and then we had to define what the food safety culture meant to Ring. We identified tenets so that we could learn how we support it from the top down. How are we going to be in alignment? Make sure everyone's involved. Make sure everyone understands their part. How will we reinforce accountability, but also encourage voicing concerns and continue to improve? Next slide. So we communicated the changes and our expectations to our sites. We knew auditors would expect additional evidence for all the things that were already in 8.1, but they would also want to make sure that everyone understands what food safety is, how their role affects it. Are we talking about it? Are we encouraging? Are we making sure that we're not overworking employees and just walking by issues because we don't have time? If we give sites best practices, are they adopting those best practices? Next slide. So we provided our sites with an action plan spreadsheet on all the SQF 9 changes and what we thought would be acceptable evidence. We used our inspection system, which is iAuditor, to develop a food safety culture assessment. This allowed our management teams to be able to rate themselves as a team on things like management commitment, engagement, accountability, and make sure that they can build an action plan to improve their site. We also developed a sample employee engagement survey using Microsoft Forms. Next slide. So here you can see examples from just one of our site surveys. They gained a lot of valuable insights on how involved their employees were and how they viewed their role and their team's role. For example, they asked if everyone on the shift demonstrates food safety awareness in their daily actions, their normal chores. Is it a top priority? Is it something they do only because they're asked to do it? They were asked if they're included in policy improvement. How do they rate their site's priorities between profit, production, food safety, quality, safety? And you can learn a lot from a really simple scale like that. Next slide. Beyond just the assessment and survey, I'll share a few other things that we did to show an improvement in our culture. We took our tenets and we wrote culture as an umbrella to our entire corporate food safety program. We included more specific requirements in some of our corporate policies. We asked sites to do a more thorough job at policy effectiveness reviews and make sure that they're interviewing employees. Next slide. We further improved our operations and engineering partnerships so that sites are involved all the way from selecting equipment through the runoff and through the installation, so we can make sure design and cleanability and maintenance are not going to be an issue. We've been vastly improving how we perform our inspections and audits and how we do our action planning, which again, iAuditor has been a very big help in that transition. With that, we're making sure that critical processes have routine supervisor verifications. We are identifying metrics like procedure compliance, non-conforming, complaints, scars, all the normal things that we might look at. But with the help of Power BI, we're able to more easily drill into our data and start to find correlations. Next slide. Sites are making sure that everyone understands their role and the consequences to not following control measures. If you don't do this, this will happen. They're ensuring that their backups for key positions are practicing those extra roles. So when it comes time to fill in, they don't start scrambling and trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. We want to make sure that sites give employees the power to stop production and enact non-conforming, not just tell a supervisor who may get to it an hour down the road. We're making sure that food safety is discussed in more than just routine monthly management meetings. Is it in your shift meetings or committee meetings? Next slide. So far, the biggest thing that we've seen our auditors ask for is how we reward employees and how we encourage them to report observations. Over the years with our observation program, which was primarily on paper, we were originally starting to tell employees, you know what, you need to turn in a certain number of these every month for each category: safety, quality, food safety. But really, the observations weren't that great. We had a lot of duplicates. They weren't very good quality. Once we made it optional and we explained the importance, the people that wanted to turn in observations were turning in good quality observations. And the auditors were looking for documented proof on how we reward employees, not just for observations, but how do we reward them for solving issues, for doing good work. So just one of many examples of what our sites do. We have a site who has a Star Performer Award. Anyone can nominate another employee for doing a good deed. And at the end of the month, the management team does a drawing and several of them get a gift card. At the end of the quarter, whoever got the most nominations will get an additional gift card. Next slide. So you have to ask yourself, how do you know if you have a good culture? I believe it should be something that you can just feel. People are doing things because it's the right thing to do, and they're doing it all the time, not just if they're being watched. Food safety is not one person's responsibility. It isn't the role of the quality or food safety manager. It's the role of everybody. Tasks aren't a chore, but it's just a normal, expected behavior. We're working proactively. Next slide. So Ring's journey to food safety and quality was very similar to the evolution of methods over the last 100 years. Of course, we had to follow regulations. We started learning how to inspect for quality control. Food safety came along and we had to start learning and adapting, what does HACCP mean, especially in packaging, which is pretty unique. And we had to prove it with audits. But really, those three physical program aspects are just the pillars. They're just the program. It's not really complete without having the data, integrating it, living it. And that really is the cap or the roof of the entire program. That's the food safety culture. Next slide. And I appreciate the time, and I will pass it over to Polly.
Hello, thank you, Corey. That was awesome. So I'll start off introducing myself. My name is Polly, and I have been part of food safety for about 3.5 years now. So I've learned a lot in the past 3.5 years, and I spent a great deal of time reading and taking webinars specifically on food safety culture. As soon as I started, I hit the ground running. I was like, culture sounds like a really cool thing. So let me learn about it. I took the foundation that we already had and helped create our culture, Killer Brownie style. I can't tell you exactly what your company is going to need because the only lens I have is the Killer Brownie lens. But I'll spend the next few minutes just trying to tell you what's worked for us and our quest for a healthy food safety culture. Next slide. In the 4 years that I've been at Killer Brownie, I've watched our company grow from just 8 employees to over 60. The food safety team was only about 1 person and one like part-timer, and there's about 10 of us now, so more than the company started with altogether with. But the responsibility of food safety has always remained the same. It's the responsibility of each individual that works here. It isn't up to one team or one person, just like Corey was saying. It's everybody. Same as day one when we were in our little facility with 8 people, and now in our brand new 27,000 square foot facility. We've got paintings on our beautiful walls. One of them says, "The strength of the team is individual, and the strength of the individual is the team." And we really live by that. We try to focus on the individuals to make each person grow, because with the growth of the individual is the growth of our team. Our culture may have started out by accident. I don't know how intentional it was when I started, but it pretty much goes from upper management having buy-in to every single team member, because if we don't have buy-in from the people that are working the floor, we've got nothing. We just have a bunch of words on the wall. Next slide. So as we've grown, we've learned to keep our mission and vision in mind for everything that we do. We've taken training courses on this, and it works as a filter for every decision we make. Food safety and quality are not separate from this mission and vision. They are at the forefront. While our mission seems to be more about consumers of our brownies, we deliberately wrote it so it included our customers, wholesalers, and our team. Team members are just as much of a part of the most delightful brownie experience as the person that's eating the brownie. We want them to come into work, into the warehouse, production, packaging teams, and feel that that statement isn't just for marketing, that it's about growing a team that cares about each other and what we do and what our company does. Next slide. So to keep our mission and vision alive, the entire operation needs to believe in it. We developed a system of praise, and we call it Brownie Points. You can see the little Brownie Points pad right there. We have those little pads all around the building and pens available, and we write Brownie Points whenever we see somebody going above and beyond what might just be like normal behavior. So we're rewarding somebody that, maybe you just needed salt and somebody had salt for your lunch, or maybe somebody discovered a potential, metal contamination. So it can go from any level. What's really cool about the Brownie Points is that as I sit back and listen to them, I've noticed that a lot of them have to do with food safety, even though it's not specifically written from a food safety team member or to a food safety team member. So you've got people out on the floor that are looking out for that and seeing like, wow, you really noticed that. And it had, not their job title, maybe nothing to do with their job, but it wasn't in their job description. So every month we gather around. We're a smaller company, so we do gather around once a month and we read those Brownie Points out loud. Any remote workers, they get to Teams in, and we give out a prize. We have a random drawing, and not only the person that receives the prize or receives the Brownie Point gets a prize, but the person that gave it also does. So it's an incentive to really start looking around your environment and recognizing what people are doing for each other and for the company. Next slide. So one of the great things that came out of our Brownie Point system was that it helped us actually develop our core values. Essentially, every single person that worked at Killer Brownie, whether they realized it or not, had a word in developing our core values. So a group of us in management, myself included, got together for a few days worth of work, and we read a couple of months worth of Killer Brownie Points, and we just read them and started to categorize, like, this is what people are looking for in our company. This is, the core value. And you can see some of the words, we have those words up on our walls too. Are people looking for tenacity? Are they looking for leadership? And as we read through the Brownie Points, we started to see, okay, these are going to become our core values. And then we developed the 4 core values. that we posted on our wall. And after the core values were developed and we defined them, we put them on the wall, and then we asked our team members, or just anybody that works in the facility, to write on those whenever they see an example. And as you can see in the picture, we have some beautiful examples and beautiful pictures of what we believe is representative of our core values. About a week after I took this picture and presented this, my slideshow, we got permanent, beautiful glass ones that were designed by a printer. And so those are hanging now instead of these poster boards. Next slide. So we use our core values during interviews to filter out our candidates. And then we use them for sure when we're in training. So the core values, again, they're love, creativity, tenacity, and joy. Love is the act of compassionate guidance or support toward reaching our fullest potential. Creativity, the ability to express and accept ideas for solutions that have not yet been conceived. Tenacity, a persistent loyalty to our common purpose. And joy, a deep, confident state of being inspired by accomplishments. So when we use those, we make sure that people understand how they fit in with the company and how they fit in with our culture. Next slide. So during our first day of training, they go through the core values. And then after they're done with all of the HR paperwork and all that other stuff that you have to do for onboarding, they begin rigorous food safety training. Nobody hits the floor until they are trained in all of our food safety. So the first thing they do is they go on a tour with our compliance tech, and she takes them around, and the very first thing she does is define SQF. The very next thing she does is, once again, define our food safety culture. And that means different things to different people, but for us, whenever we talk about food safety culture, it means that we are expected to take food safety and quality as much a part of our job as anything else. So whether you're working sanitation, warehouse, production, marketing, food safety is important. And we are expected to and have the responsibility to shut the line down if we need to, and bring your concerns to people. And we have a culture of listening to those concerns. Next slide. So after they're told about their rights and responsibilities to shut down lines or, express any concerns, then they come and see me. And I get to take them into training, and we use Alchemy also. So we do our Alchemy videos. First, they get to hear from me again that their responsibility is to shut the line down if they need to, or stop the line, or bring concerns to management. So they're hearing it repetition over and over again, that we believe that food safety and quality are just as much a part of their job as anything else that they're doing for their job. And it's a building block. It's a building block to complete food safety culture. Next slide. So the last thing I talk about is our branding. Yes, we love to put our Killer Brownie logo on everything. Here's a lovely picture of me and our president. This shirt that I have on in that picture is from a t-shirt contest that we had, and we actually ended up combining several ideas from a few of the submissions. And as you can see, there's our core values, and I'm not sure why tenacity is only 85%, but maybe we need to bring that up a little bit. So everybody gets their Killer Brownie shirts when they start. We have little gifts like this that we end up giving out every now and then. At 90 days, you get your coveted hoodie. So everybody just wants that hoodie. So they stay for the 90 days at the very least. And of course, then they're hooked. And then with each anniversary, we get, like right now, we're giving out a Killer Brownie mug on your 1-year anniversary. Then, I'm not sure what's up for next year. I'm still waiting on my 1-year one because we just started it. So we wear our gear with pride, and I've noticed like a lot of people, they just wear it out to the stores. It's not just a uniform in for work. So we're really, really proud of our brand and what our company stands for. We're a place of laughter, smiles, And while there's always frustrations, our core values hold us up to the challenges. So the very last thing I wanted to say is that teaching to a test isn't learning, and training to an audit is not culture. So keep that in mind when you're trying to develop your culture. I don't know if we have any time left for questions. So if we want to bring us all back on screen, if not, don't worry, we're going to be at the Ask the Experts session tomorrow.
Yeah, I do believe we have time for just a few questions. So I'm going to have a question for each of you. I'll start with Brian. So the question was asked, did Treehouse identify a problem statement before doing their root cause analysis?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tammy. And I think one of the things that we look at is, and we manage and measure, is our overall quality incidents. And so how do we have triggers for those that are pre-identified, and we've taken a lot of things from safety and how you might do that. So think about lost time accident and those different levels of that, and we've incorporated that in there. And when we see elements that look like they are behavior-based type root causes, that really begins to begin the problem statement and how we would address that, and looking at the food safety culture behavior. And it really is driven by the nature of the incident, and whether that is, employee driven and behavior driven, or, otherwise. And if that problem statement does look like there's a gap in training, gap in behavior, or how we actually performed our roles, then that's when we'll go into the greater root cause around food safety culture.
Okay, thank you. Corey, I believe this question was for you. What challenges or resistance did you encounter when you were integrating iAuditor into the business?
Sure. So iAuditor being an electronic system, and we were moving from paper, obviously that was our biggest challenge, is just getting employees to understand how to use iPads. You can do it on iPhones as well, or on a website, but learning how to put information into a computer, especially in manufacturing where you have employees who don't necessarily use computers and iPads every day. We do a lot of things on the computers, but there are some employees that just don't need that for their job. The other biggest piece was just implementation, getting the management team on board. Some of them were not sure if it was the right tool; they're not used to it. And certainly in a corporate office role, we pushed out a lot of ideas and templates and made it easy. But just taking the time to sit down and take your forms and convert them and change your way of doing business, I think that was a really big challenge. That you can change your frequencies, you can change your structure of how you would do what was normally a paper form, but getting the management team to sit down, put it together, walk out on the floor and show people how to use it, that's a really big challenge to find time, especially in manufacturing. And then one last challenge for us would be just figuring out how to structure it, especially in manufacturing, where you don't necessarily need every employee logging into a system on a device. It takes a lot of time. It's challenging to log in and out every shift. So figuring out how to use it in a kind of a generic fashion where we're using general accounts and everybody kind of shares an iPad, and we still want immediate notifications, but it's great to have the pictures. It's great to be able to have the management team get notifications as soon as something happens. So just that structure was a little bit of a challenge at the beginning.
Nice. And then we'll go to Polly with our last question. We've talked a lot about incentives. I think we heard that mentioned several times. So Polly, you talked a lot about your incentives, and so how did you all come up with those? Give us a little insight into what it is that's really motivating your employees.
Well, we really wanted everybody to feel like they were a part of something bigger than themselves. And since we're a Brownie company, Brownie points was pretty much that was a given. And I think what's funny is that even though we have a gift card reward at the end of a drawing, and we have other little gifts that we give out during the Brownie points reading, I think the most fun part that everybody seems to feel is when they're being read out loud and they're being recognized by all of their peers for doing the right thing, or for doing the thing that they just didn't even realize. Most of the times you get a Brownie point, you don't even realize you had done something so amazing to somebody else. So it just goes to show that like being a better person and being a better team member and peer is what everybody's looking for. And just being able to be recognized for that is amazing.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we are at the end of our session. So for those of you that are going to stick around for our post-session chats, click on the little tab in your upper right-hand corner. It says breakouts. So click on there and you can join a breakout session with 5 or 6 of the other participants here today and join that way. We also have the Ask the Experts with all of our presenters in this session that will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can see it scrolling across the bottom. And so lots of ways to get some more questions answered for food safety culture. Again, thank you all for joining. Please join the breakout tabs or the breakout sessions and continue your food safety culture journey. So thank you all very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.